Welcome to You're Wrong About, the podcast where if the narrative doesn't fit, it ain't legit.
Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome to WatchMojo. Today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 true crime podcasts to listen to in 2021.
I never set out to investigate the Long Island serial killer. It was only through a tragic and unexpected sequence of events that my partner and I became entangled in this case.
On 90s Crime Time, you're more than likely going to be amazed at just how many violent crimes occurred during this time period.
On this September night in 1978, the TV viewing audience would watch as Cheryl Bradshaw was introduced to Bachelor Number 1 by his given name.
For this list, we're looking at the best true crime podcasts that we think you should spend your time on in 2021. What's your favorite podcast? Be sure to let us know in the comments. All right, let's get to it.
Number 10, Hollywood Crime Scene. The podcast landscape is absolutely filled with true crime, and it's easy to get lost among all the different shows.
In this documentary, they talked to a lot of victims that he conned, and they're literally like, he was like, you own part of the Backstreet Boys now, like that kind of stuff. And they were like, you can meet the Backstreet Boys. They would get tickets to concerts.
A true crime podcast needs to truly stand out to get noticed within the oversaturated genre. And Hollywood Crime Scene is that podcast. Hosted by Desi Jetikin and Rachel Fisher, Hollywood Crime Scene details scandals, crimes, and sordid stories that have plagued Hollywood throughout the years. The show mixes standalone episodes with longer two-parters.
People witness this, by the way, so that's how you have this information. That must be horrible to see. Jesus Christ.
It's so awful.
In 2021, the podcast has covered the likes of Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, a con man named Lou Pearlman, and Winnie Ruth Judd, aka the Trunk Murderess, who transported bodies in suitcases. Number 9, Case File True Crime Podcast.
Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. If you feel at any time you need support, please contact your local crisis centre.
Case File is by far one of the most popular true crime podcasts, and for good reason. Hosted by an anonymous Australian host, Case File has aired since January 2016, with each episode serving as a mini audiobook. Unlike many other true crime podcasts, Case File is not conversational in nature. Rather, the podcast tells its stories in narrative fashion, complete with studious background information and plot twists.
A small trickle of blood ran down the driver's side door. Cindy was nowhere to be found.
The research is also second to none, with the podcast reportedly consisting of 4 researchers and writers who access primary resources to get their information. But it's not just the research and storytelling that sets Case File apart. The podcast is also impeccably produced, complete with an eerie sound design and original compositions.
During the 70s in California, police were taught to shoot twice. He was also conscious not to leave fingerprints at his crime scenes, as that was the primary way for police to identify suspects at the time.
Number 8, The Missing Crypto Queen.
What would a big criminal organization do with people who could be such a liability for them?
Some podcasts are devoted to specific stories, much like a documentary miniseries. The Missing Crypto Queen is a standout example. Expertly produced by the BBC, this podcast is tamer than most true crime stories, as it forgoes gory serial killings to tell an enthralling story about an experienced con artist. The podcast is devoted to Bulgarian fraudster Ruja Ignatova and her Ponzi scheme OneCoin.
But OneCoin was nothing but an old-fashioned pyramid scam with no real technology behind it.
OneCoin is not a cryptocurrency. There is no blockchain, and I can prove it.
Promoted as a cryptocurrency in the vein of Bitcoin, OneCoin has conned people out of an unbelievable $4 billion, leading British daily newspaper The Times to call it, quote, one of the biggest scams in history. Ignatova went on the run in 2017 and has yet to be found. She's currently facing up to 90 years in prison.
Is it possible that some of these payments and Ruja's disappearance are connected, and that those connections might lead us to where she is now?
Number 7, Unraveled, Long Island Serial Killer.
I never set out to investigate the Long Island serial killer. It was only through a tragic and unexpected sequence of events that my partner and I became entangled in this case.
Another podcast devoted to one case, Unraveled, concerns the still unsolved story of the Long Island serial killer. Also known as the Craigslist Ripper, this person is believed to have killed at least 10 people over a 20-year period, with their remains being found in the Suffolk and Nassau counties of New York in 2010 and 2011. Produced by Discovery, Unraveled Long Island Serial Killer is hosted by Alexis Linkletter and Billy Jensen, and sees them exploring both the case and the reasons behind its frustratingly unsolved status.
If there's anybody who knows how to kill someone and get away with it, it's a cop.
Somebody's just keeping the cover-up going.
It makes for enthralling listening, and it brings attention to one of the biggest true crime stories of our time.
If you had a son that was accused of something and he was innocent and went to prison for it, maybe you could understand what it's like.
Number 6. Welcome to your fantasy.
It started in a dumpy little nightclub in LA during the last days of disco, but by the mid-'80s, it blew up into a massive global phenomenon.
Founded in 1979 and rising to prominence in the early 80s, Chippendales were an all-male dance troupe who seduced and entertained female audiences with their oily bare chests, sensual dancing, and stripteases. Today, Chippendales perform at the Rio All-Suite Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. The tale of the troupe's past, however, is one of corruption, arson, and murder.
But behind the nonstop party, there was something much darker going on.
Police say he was murdered in his 15th floor office.
You know, hello. If you actually killed a man, you should pay for that.
Gimlet Media's Welcome to Your Fantasy is a great podcast that's expertly produced and meticulously researched, complete with first-hand interviews with co-conspirators and former Chippendale dancers.
And I've taken my clothes off for over 1 million women.
Wow, put that on your tombstone one
Tell me about it, right?
Number 5, 90s Crime Time.
Thank you for tuning into 90s Crime Time. And if you're new to 90s Crime Time, welcome to the show.
This true crime podcast is unique as it focuses entirely on stories from the 1990s. The podcast started its life on host Simone Taylor's Instagram account before blossoming into what it is today. 90s Crime Time covers both well-known and obscure true crime stories from the 90s. And each episode only lasts half an hour, making it perfect for commutes or chores around the house.
On 90s Crime Time, you're more than likely going to be amazed at just how many violent crimes occurred during this time period.
In 2021, the show has covered a serial arsonist in Seattle, a billionaire who hired a sketchy staff member, and a woman who found danger on an internet chat room, among others. The stories are always interesting, and they are all very well told by Taylor. Number 4, The Dating Game Killer.
On this September night in 1978, the TV viewing audience would watch as Cheryl Bradshaw was introduced to Bachelor Number 1 by his given name.
In 1978, a contestant named Rodney Alcala appeared on The Dating Game, a syndicated game show that saw a bachelorette questioning 3 potential bachelors and taking the winner on a date.
Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome.
At the time, Alcala was in the midst of a killing spree that resulted in at least 8 deaths. His true victim count remains unknown, but he was eventually sentenced to life on 7 murders that occurred between 1971 and 1979. Funnily enough, The Bachelorette and a fellow contestant described Alcala as, quote, creepy and, quote, very strange. Produced by Wondery and hosted by Tracy Patton and Stephen Lang of Avatar and Don't Breathe fame, The Dating Game Killer is a fantastic podcast that goes into painstaking detail regarding Alcala's life, crimes, and infamous appearance on syndicated television.
No one on The Dating Game is aware that Bachelor Number 1 is also a twice convicted felon and registered sex offender, that he spent 6 years in prison, or that he was questioned in the Hillside Strangler case and is considered a person of interest in the murder of a young woman in New York.
Number 3, You're Wrong About.
Welcome to You're Wrong About, the podcast where if the narrative doesn't fit, it ain't legit.
Hosted by Michael Hobbs and Sarah Marshall, You're Wrong About is a history and human interest podcast concerned with misunderstood stories of the past. As its title suggests, You're Wrong About covers historical events that have been poorly reported or misunderstood by the general public, while also aiming to tell the true and complex story at its core. While not necessarily a true crime podcast, You're Wrong About has covered many notable true crime cases.
The pre-existing fear of Satan, which we had throughout the 70s
parties, and there's the fear of heavy metal bands putting secret backwards satanic messages in their songs, and this idea of America becoming a less Christian country, and paganism and the dark side of the hippie movement.
These include the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, the Jonestown Massacre, and Jeffrey Dahmer, among many others. Each episode is expertly researched, the hosts are fun and affable, and each episode runs 60 to 90 minutes, striking the perfect balance between depth and easy listening.
I mean, I feel like when I look at his life, it feels like this coalescence of just all of these different factors, that he was born with the hardware that he had, and that he was so emotionally isolated growing up.
Number 2, Murder History Girls.
Welcome to the Murder History Girls. Grab your favorite cup of tea, or in Mickey's case, her favorite bottle of beer, get cozy, and enjoy this week's episode.
Hosted by sisters Mickey Wilkerson and Brandy Samples, Murder History Girls is a true crime podcast infused with comedy. It doesn't sound like comedy and true crime should go together, but the sisters toe the line and strike a wonderful balance, ensuring that this podcast is informative and thrilling, but also very, very funny.
He drove around and he had like 12 Rolls Royce, and he would drive every day, just drive a new one around. So it's crazy, like these people, like they have, yeah, like I want the gall that these people have.
The podcast has covered a wide array of topics, including Jack the Ripper, lobotomies, the origins of werewolves, and Rasputin, among many others. Few true crime podcasts utilize comedy to such success, making Murder History Girls essential listening.
Well, I personally am always looking for new true crime podcast recommendations, so I cannot wait to see what we've got at number 1, which we will get to after these honorable mentions.
My Favorite Murder, another true crime comedy podcast hosted by 2 comedians.
It's much more fun to talk about real things that we can both get into instead of like, well, did you watch it or didn't you? That's what that's what all podcasts should be called now.
Let me challenge you.
Did you or not watch it?
The Clown and the Candyman, a dark network connected Dean Corll and John Wayne Gacy.
I can't say it right now because if I say it, I'm gonna wind up dead.
Dr. Death. Wondery investigates cases of medical malpractice.
You'll learn something that you can barely comprehend. You don't have cancer. You never did. And you're not the only one.
Chameleon. Hollywood Con Queen. A mysterious woman cons Hollywood day players.
We've chased leads across 6 countries and 3 continents. We're obsessed with this. And one way or another, we're gonna find out who's behind it.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, In the Dark. It's arguably the best true crime podcast ever produced. The first season of In the Dark concerns the kidnapping and murder of 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling.
The kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling changed life for hundreds of thousands of people across the country. It even led to a federal law that requires all states to maintain registries of sex offenders.
The second, an epic 23-episode adventure, concerns Curtis Flowers, who was tried for murder on 6 separate occasions and spent over 20 years in prison before he was released in 2019 without an official sentencing.
All along, Curtis Flowers has maintained his innocence. Curtis kept appealing his convictions, he kept winning, and he kept getting tried again, all by the same prosecutor.
4 of his trials were overturned after conviction, and 2 ended in mistrials. In the Dark contains stellar investigative journalism from American public media, winning 2 Peabody Awards for, quote, transcending the genre, and, quote, offering a masterclass in true crime podcasting. It really doesn't get much better than this.
So we are in the car on our way to talk to Curtis Flowers. Believe it or not, after all this time. Kind of crazy.
I actually listened to In the Dark, and I definitely recommend it. But I am always looking for new true crime podcasts to listen to, so if you have one that we missed on this list, be sure to let us know about it in the comments. Or come tell me on Twitter or Instagram at Rebecca Brayton, or on my YouTube channel. See ya!